Hamilton walked away from Ferrari's simulator. Just like that. No big announcement, no drama in front of the cameras, just a quiet decision that sent a shockwave through the paddock. And the question nobody is asking out loud is the one that changes everything. What exactly did Hamilton see inside that data that made him stop trusting it? Before we go deeper into what may be one of the most calculated moves of this Formula One season, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read every single one. And stay until the end, because our special commentator from the newsroom will be here to break this down with us. Something was wrong inside Ferrari, and Lewis Hamilton knew it before anyone else did. Not the kind of wrong you see on a timing screen, not a bad qualifying lap or a strategy call that backfired. This was something deeper, something that most people in the paddock either didn't notice or didn't want to talk about. And the moment Hamilton decided to act on it, everything changed. Let's go back to Miami. Ferrari arrived at that race weekend with genuine confidence. They had brought one of the most significant upgrade packages of the entire 2026 season. New aerodynamic surfaces, refined airflow management, months of development work packed into a single weekend. The expectation inside the team was simple. This upgrade would finally close the gap. It didn't, not even close. Hamilton crossed the finish line frustrated. Not the kind of frustration that comes from a bad tire call or a slow pit stop. This was something more quiet, more internal, the kind of frustration you carry with you on the flight home when you're turning things over in your mind and realizing that the numbers don't add up. And for Hamilton, one specific number kept standing out: the simulator. Now, here's what you need to understand about modern Formula One. The simulator isn't just a training tool. It's not something drivers use to stay sharp between races. In 2026, the simulator is the foundation of everything. Every aerodynamic decision, every suspension setup, every energy deployment strategy, every braking point calibration, all of it is built on data that comes directly from simulation work done back at the factory. Before a single wheel turns on track, thousands of engineering hours have already been invested in virtual laps. So when a driver tells you the simulator isn't matching reality, that's not a small complaint. That's an alarm. And Hamilton wasn't just hinting at a minor discrepancy. He was saying, clearly and directly, that what Ferrari was finding in the simulator was behaving completely differently once the SF26 hit real asphalt. Think about what that actually means for a moment. If the virtual data and the real-world data are pulling in opposite directions, then every setup Ferrari builds around simulator results is potentially built on a foundation that doesn't reflect the actual car. You're not just losing time on a single weekend. You could be pointing your entire development direction toward the wrong answer. And Hamilton, with 7 world championships and more than 300 Grand Prix of experience, understood exactly what that meant. He had seen this kind of problem before, not here, not at Ferrari, but in his years at McLaren, at Mercedes. He knows what it looks like when a team starts trusting the wrong signal. When the data says one thing and the car says something completely different, and nobody wants to be the one to say out loud that the data might be wrong. He's been in rooms where that conversation happened too late. He didn't want that to happen again. So before the Canadian Grand Prix, Hamilton made a decision that almost nobody in the paddock expected. He walked away from the simulator. Not a partial reduction in preparation time, not a different focus for the sessions. A full departure from the traditional pre-race simulation routine that every top team in Formula One relies on. And let's be very clear about why this is so unusual. When performance drops in modern Formula One, teams don't reduce simulator time. They increase it. They go deeper into the data. They run more virtual laps, more comparative analyses, more correlation studies. The simulator is the answer to every question, the solution to every problem, the starting point for every fix. Hamilton rejected that logic entirely. He decided the simulator wasn't the answer. He decided it might actually be part of the problem. And then something interesting happens when you look back at the 2026 season with this in mind: China. The Chinese Grand Prix was the one weekend this season where Hamilton truly felt comfortable in the car, where the pace felt natural, where the setup clicked, where the SF26 responded the way a seven-time champion expects a car to respond. And it's also the weekend where Hamilton had significantly reduced his traditional simulator preparation. Is that a coincidence? Maybe. Formula One is a complicated sport with hundreds of variables in play every single weekend. Circuit layout, temperature, wind, tire compounds, track evolution, all of it affects car behavior in ways that are difficult to isolate cleanly. But Hamilton doesn't think in terms of coincidences. He thinks in terms of patterns. And the pattern here was becoming harder to ignore. Less simulator, better feeling with the car, more simulator work, more disconnect between expectation and reality. That's not nothing. That's a data point. And for a driver with Hamilton's level of experience and technical intelligence, a data point like that doesn't get dismissed. It gets investigated. So he investigated. And what he found, or more precisely what he began to suspect, is something that cuts to the core of how Ferrari has been preparing this car all season long. The SF26 is not a simple car. Even by Formula One standards, the 2026 Ferrari is one of the most technically complex machines on the grid. The new aerodynamic regulations that came into effect this season forced every team to make massive structural changes to their designs. But Ferrari's interpretation of those regulations went further than most. The SF26 introduced a completely new aerodynamic philosophy, a radically different approach to downforce generation, and a hybrid power unit system with levels of complexity that push the boundaries of what drivers can manage in real time. This is not a car that forgives mistakes. It doesn't smooth over small errors in setup. It doesn't settle into a comfortable window and stay there. It demands precision and it rewards it, but only when everything is calibrated correctly. And therein lies the problem. When a car is this complex, the relationship between simulator behavior and real-world behavior becomes critical. Small differences in how the virtual model responds versus how the actual physical car responds can send engineers down paths that seem logical on paper but produce the wrong results on track. Ferrari's engineers are not making careless mistakes. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're trusting the process. They're following the data. They're building setups based on the most advanced simulation technology in motorsport. But what if the model itself is slightly off? What if the virtual SF26 and the real SF26 are not quite the same car? That's the question Hamilton started asking. Quietly, internally, in the way that experienced drivers process technical problems, not with dramatic declarations, but with careful observation and then deliberate action. Montreal was chosen as the test. And the choice of circuit is not random. The circuit Gilles Villeneuve is a track where data and numbers matter less than almost anywhere else on the calendar. It's a street circuit built on a man-made island in the St. Lawrence River. Concrete walls on both sides, no runoff, nowhere to hide when the setup isn't right. And it's a track that rewards a very specific set of qualities that have nothing to do with aerodynamic downforce numbers or hybrid energy deployment maps. It rewards trust. Trust between the driver and the car. Trust in braking points that arrive fast and leave no room for hesitation. Trust in the front end when you turn in late and need the car to respond exactly the way you felt it would. Hamilton knows this track like a second language. He won his first Formula One race here in 2007. He was 22 years old, driving for McLaren, and he crossed the finish line in Montreal for the first time as a Grand Prix winner. He came back and won here again in 2010, 2012, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. 8 victories at a single circuit. No driver in the history of Formula One has won more times at the Canadian Grand Prix. For Hamilton, this place isn't just a circuit. It's the track where he learned who he was as a racing driver. And now he's coming back, not to relive history, but to test a theory that could reshape the rest of Ferrari's season. The theory is straightforward. If you arrive in Montreal without a simulator-built setup telling you what the car should feel like, you have no choice but to listen to the car itself. You have to feel what it's actually doing. You have to respond to reality instead of to a model of reality. And if the disconnect Hamilton sensed is real, if the simulator has genuinely been producing misleading information, then arriving in Montreal with fresh ears, without preconceived expectations baked in from virtual sessions, might be exactly what he and Ferrari need. It might be the only way to hear the car clearly, but there's a layer to this that goes beyond one race weekend. Because if Hamilton is right, the implications stretch much further than Montreal. Think about the 2026 development race. Every team on the grid is in the middle of a frantic push to understand their new car, to find performance, to unlock the potential of a completely new set of regulations. Updates are being designed, manufactured, tested, and brought to the track at an aggressive pace. And every single one of those updates at Ferrari is being validated primarily through simulator data. If that data is unreliable, then every update Ferrari has brought this season may have been developed based on feedback that doesn't accurately reflect the real car. Every aerodynamic element, every suspension modification, every setup change, built on a virtual model that might be pointing in a slightly wrong direction. That's not a small problem. That's an existential threat to a season. And Ferrari knows this. The team's engineers are not unaware of correlation challenges. This is a known risk in modern Formula One, and every team invests enormous resources in correlation work. The process of comparing simulator predictions against real-world results and closing the gap between them. But closing that gap takes time. And in 2026, with the regulations having changed so dramatically, the task is harder than it has ever been. The SF26 is new. The tire compounds are new. The aerodynamic philosophy is new. The hybrid system architecture is new. Building an accurate virtual model of a car, this complex, in a regulatory environment, this different from anything before it, is a genuinely enormous challenge, which is exactly why Hamilton's instinct matters so much right now. He's not running away from the process. He's not dismissing Ferrari's engineers or their work. He's doing something far more intelligent than that. He's offering a reference point. By coming to Montreal without simulator-derived setup expectations, Hamilton gives Ferrari's engineers an invaluable piece of information, a baseline. What does the car feel like when it hasn't been configured based on virtual data? Where does the driver's natural instinct take the setup when it isn't anchored to model predictions? If that natural baseline produces a better result than the simulator-guided approach has managed this season, then Ferrari has its answer. And if the baseline underperforms, then the simulator isn't the problem, and the team can redirect its energy accordingly. Either way, Hamilton is generating information. Real, physical, unfiltered information about a car that may have been speaking one language while everyone around it was listening for another. Now there's a human dimension to this story that doesn't always get discussed. Lewis Hamilton arrived at Ferrari as the most successful driver in the history of Formula One. 7 world titles, 104 race victories, a record that may never be broken. He came to Maranello with the explicit goal of adding a legendary chapter to an already historic career. He is 40 years old. He has more experience than almost anyone who has ever sat in a Formula One car. And yet, in his first season with Ferrari, he finds himself navigating a technical situation that is genuinely difficult. A car with enormous potential that hasn't yet found the performance its designers intended. That's a strange position for someone of his stature, and the way he's responding to it says everything about why he's been at the top of this sport for 2 decades. He's not panicking, he's not demanding dramatic changes or publicly questioning his team. He's doing what elite competitors always do when things aren't working. He's stripping the situation down to first principles and asking the most basic question possible. What does the car actually feel like? Not what the data says it should feel like. Not what the simulator predicted it would feel like. What does it actually physically feel like when you're sitting in the cockpit at 200 kilometers per hour with the walls 3 meters away? That's Hamilton's reference point. And it's one of the most valuable tools in the sport. Meanwhile, the pressure around Ferrari is increasing. Mercedes arrived in Montreal with a significant upgrade package of their own. A team that knows Montreal well, that has a car which has been progressively improving through the season, and that understands exactly how to extract performance in conditions where the walls punish mistakes and the braking zones test every ounce of a driver's commitment. McLaren continues to push. Their development pace has been impressive this season, and their ability to extract consistent points at every type of circuit has kept them firmly in the championship conversation. Ferrari cannot afford to fall further behind, which makes Hamilton's decision simultaneously brave and necessary. There was a moment, reportedly in the days after Miami, when Hamilton sat with Ferrari's engineering leadership and laid out exactly what he was feeling, not in abstract terms. In precise, specific technical language, the kind of language that makes clear you've thought about something carefully and you're not going to be talked out of it. He explained the China correlation. He explained the Miami disconnect. He explained what he believed was happening and what he wanted to try. Ferrari listened, and that in itself is significant. Ferrari allowing Hamilton to deviate from the standard preparation protocol, in a season where every development point matters, where every setup decision could be the difference between a podium and a midfield result, is not a small thing. It represents a level of trust between driver and engineering team that only develops when both sides have shown a willingness to be honest with each other. Hamilton was honest about what he was experiencing. Ferrari was honest about the fact that answers were needed, and together they agreed to try something different in Montreal. That's not a crisis. That's a functioning partnership under pressure. And pressure is exactly where partnerships either break or prove themselves. The paddock reaction to Hamilton's decision, once word filtered out through the network of journalists, engineers and insiders who form the information ecosystem of Formula One, was a mixture of surprise and respect. Surprise, because in the current era of the sport, no team with championship ambitions voluntarily walks away from simulator preparation. The resource investment is too large, the competitive pressure too intense, the risk of arriving at a circuit underprepared too significant. Respect, because most people in Formula One understand intuitively that Hamilton doesn't make this kind of move without a reason. When a driver with his track record acts against conventional wisdom, the conventional response in the paddock is to pay attention. And there's one more detail that deserves to sit with you. Jenson Button, world champion, Hamilton's former rival, someone who knows better than most what it takes to extract performance from a Formula One car at this level, said publicly in the build-up to Montreal that Hamilton owes this track a victory this season. Button pointed to Montreal specifically. not as sentiment or nostalgia, but as a genuine strategic read on where the circuit's characteristics could align with what Hamilton does best. And he wasn't the only one. Several former drivers and analysts who have watched Hamilton closely this season noticed the same thing. In the moments where he was most at ease in the SF26, it was never when the car felt like the simulator predicted. It was always when the car surprised him in the right direction, when something felt intuitively correct before the data had a chance to explain why. That's a driver finding his feel. And feel, real, physical, sensory feel, is something no simulator can fully replicate. Here's what this whole situation ultimately comes down to. Formula One in 2026 has become the most data-saturated era in the sport's history. The amount of information available to teams, from sensors embedded throughout the car, to real-time telemetry, to multi-day factory simulation programs, is almost incomprehensible. Engineers have never had more tools. Data scientists have never had more inputs. The sport has never been more thoroughly analyzed, and yet a 7-time world champion is sitting in a conference room at Ferrari and saying, clearly, I don't trust what the simulation is telling us. That's a moment that deserves more attention than it's getting, because Hamilton isn't rejecting data. He's raising a more precise concern, that the model the data is flowing through may not accurately represent the physical reality of the car. In engineering, that's a correlation problem. In human terms, it's something older and more fundamental than any simulation technology. It's the difference between the map and the territory. The simulator is the map. The circuit Gilles Villeneuve is the territory. And Hamilton is suggesting that Ferrari may have been navigating by a map that doesn't quite match the ground beneath their tires. Montreal will be the test. Not just a test of setup, not just a test of pace, a test of a theory that, if it proves correct, will force Ferrari to look very honestly at the foundation of their technical process and ask how much of what they've built this season has been built on the right information. If Hamilton arrives in Canada and, without the traditional simulation guidance, finds a setup that works, if the car suddenly clicks, if the weekend feels different, if the pace reflects what the car is truly capable of, then the implications for the rest of the season will be profound. Development direction could shift, correlation methodology could be revised, the entire way Ferrari prepares for race weekends could be rethought. And Hamilton, instead of being the driver who struggled to adapt to a new team in his first season, becomes the driver who identified a systemic problem before it buried the season entirely. That's the story beneath the story. That's what nobody in the mainstream coverage is fully connecting yet. This isn't about one race in Montreal. This isn't about nostalgia for a circuit where Hamilton has the most victories in history. This isn't even about whether Hamilton can challenge for a podium on a specific Sunday afternoon in June. This is about whether a team that has built its technical identity around simulation-first development may need to reconsider something fundamental about how it listens to the car. And the man asking that question isn't a frustrated driver lashing out after a bad weekend. He's the most experienced racing driver in the history of Formula One. He's asking it quietly, carefully, with the kind of precision that comes from having thought about it for a long time. And the answer, whatever it turns out to be, will tell us something important, not just about Ferrari's 2026 season, but about the future of how this sport develops cars. And this is exactly why people inside Formula One are suddenly paying very close attention to what Lewis Hamilton is doing behind the scenes. Because this may no longer be just about adaptation. It may be about Ferrari realizing something inside their entire process no longer matches reality. Now, here in our newsroom, we've been following this situation very closely, and honestly, there's another layer to this story that makes Hamilton's decision even more significant than most people realize. So let's bring in our commentator for a deeper read on what may really be happening inside Ferrari right now.
Thank you. And honestly, the more I look at this situation, the less I believe this is simply a driver trying a different preparation routine. What Hamilton is doing feels much bigger than that. Because when a driver with this level of experience suddenly stops trusting simulation data, people inside Formula One notice immediately. Nobody ignores a move like this, especially not when it comes from someone who spent decades helping build championship-winning cars at McLaren and Mercedes. And personally, I think the most important detail here is psychological. Hamilton is not reacting emotionally. He's diagnosing something. There's a huge difference between frustration and pattern recognition. Frustration creates panic. Pattern recognition creates decisions. And Hamilton's decision feels incredibly calculated. What stands out to me is that he's not attacking Ferrari publicly. He's not blaming engineers. He's not creating internal chaos. Instead, he's quietly changing the one variable he believes might be distorting the entire picture. And that's where this becomes uncomfortable for Ferrari. Because if Hamilton is right, then the simulator may not just be slightly inaccurate. It may be influencing Ferrari's entire development direction in ways the team still doesn't fully understand yet. And in modern Formula One, that's dangerous. This sport now depends on simulation more than ever before. Teams trust data almost blindly because the cars became too complex to develop any other way. But Hamilton comes from an era where drivers still relied heavily on feel, instinct, physical connection with the car. And maybe that's exactly why he sensed this before everyone else. What fascinates me most is the timing. He chose Montreal, not Monaco, not Barcelona, Montreal. A circuit where confidence matters more than perfect numbers. A place where hesitation destroys lap time instantly. And maybe Hamilton understands something Ferrari is only beginning to realize now. When the data becomes confusing, the driver's natural feeling becomes even more valuable. And if this weekend suddenly looks different for Ferrari, then I think the entire paddock is going to start asking much harder questions about what's really happening inside that simulator correlation process. Because this story may not end with Hamilton proving himself right. It may end with Ferrari realizing he saw the problem first.
And that's a fascinating point, especially what you said about Hamilton separating instinct from data, because when someone with his experience starts trusting feel over simulation, it really changes the interpretation of this entire story. So let me ask you this. Do you think Ferrari internally already suspects there's a deeper correlation problem happening behind the scenes?
I honestly think they do. Maybe not as a full-blown crisis yet, but enough to create concern internally. The key detail for me is Ferrari allowing Hamilton to break away from the traditional preparation process. Teams normally protect simulator protocols aggressively because so much of modern performance depends on them. So the fact Ferrari accepted this experiment tells me they also understand something hasn't been fully connecting between factory expectations and track behavior. And once teams start questioning correlation, that conversation spreads very quickly through the engineering side of Formula One.
And that actually makes your previous point even more interesting, because if Ferrari already senses some level of disconnect internally, then Hamilton's move suddenly feels less like rebellion and more like a warning signal coming from inside the system itself. But here's what I keep thinking about. Why do you believe Hamilton recognized this pattern before others seemed willing to publicly acknowledge it?
Experience, that's the difference. Hamilton has driven through multiple technological eras of Formula One. He understands when a car feels difficult and when a development philosophy itself feels disconnected from reality. Younger drivers often grow up fully dependent on simulator behavior because that's the environment modern Formula One created. Hamilton still trusts physical sensation first, and I think that instinct allowed him to notice inconsistencies much earlier than most people around him, especially because correlation problems rarely appear dramatically at first. They appear subtly, through small frustrations, small setup inconsistencies, tiny mismatches between expectation and reality. Veteran drivers detect those patterns faster.
And that subtlety may actually be what makes this situation so dangerous for Ferrari, because by the time a correlation issue becomes obvious publicly, the team may already have spent months developing in the wrong direction. So let me ask you this. If Hamilton suddenly performs extremely well in Montreal after abandoning the simulator routine, how big could that become inside the paddock?
Massive. Honestly, massive. Because if Ferrari suddenly looks more connected to the track environment without the traditional simulator-heavy preparation, then every team, principal, engineer, analyst, and journalist in Formula One is going to start revisiting Ferrari's entire season through a completely different lens. People will start asking, how long has this mismatch existed? How much performance was left on the table? And how many upgrades may have been developed around distorted information? That's why Montreal feels so important psychologically. This is not just another race weekend anymore. It's becoming a real-world test of Hamilton's interpretation versus Ferrari's traditional process. And if Hamilton's instincts prove correct, this story could become one of the defining technical narratives of the season.
And one final thing before we wrap this up. After everything we discussed here today, do you personally believe this decision could become a turning point in Hamilton's Ferrari chapter?
Yes, I genuinely do. Because moments like this often define relationships between elite drivers and elite teams. Not the easy weekends, not the podium celebrations, the difficult moments where someone identifies a problem early enough to change direction before it's too late. And if Ferrari eventually realizes Hamilton was seeing something hidden inside the process before everyone else did, then this may be remembered as the moment the partnership truly started functioning at championship level. Not because they ignored the problem, but because they were willing to question the system itself.
Really interesting analysis. Thank you so much for joining us here in the newsroom today and helping us break this story down from a much deeper perspective.
Always a pleasure. And honestly, I don't think this story is anywhere near finished yet.
Do you think Hamilton has identified something Ferrari genuinely isn't seeing yet? Or do you believe this is a driver still searching for his footing in a new team, reaching for explanations in a difficult moment? Leave your answer in the comments. This is one of those conversations worth having properly. And we'll be right back with our special commentator from the newsroom, who has been following this situation very closely and has her own read on what Hamilton's decision really means for Ferrari going forward. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because this story isn't finished, not by a long way. What happens in Montreal over the next few days will either validate everything Hamilton suspected or raise an entirely different set of questions about where this season is heading. Either way, you'll want to be here when it unfolds.